Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about some sleep disorders. Obviously, one of the main disorders that occur uh, is insomnia. A lot of people deal with insomnia at some point in their life. Um, Now, insomnia specifically is when you have a normal desire to sleep, but you can't. You either cannot fall asleep at all, or you cannot stay asleep. So sometimes people fall asleep, they'll sleep for an hour, they'll wake up in the middle of the night and they can't fall back asleep. And they want to fall asleep, but they can't. Um, why does this happen? This happens for a lot of reasons. It could be your diet, it could be stress in your life, social stress, stress from work, family stressors. Um, it could be other health issues that are preventing you from falling asleep. But what's going to happen if you don't sleep at all or you don't sleep well? um, you are not going to feel rested throughout the day. And so you're going to feel more stressed out, more irritable. You're not going to be able to concentrate. Um, Oftentimes, people will have what are called micro sleeps, where maybe for a minute to about 5 minutes, the person will fall asleep just so that the brain can uh, do some of its diagnostic and not overwhelm itself. Uh, but it won't be enough, obviously. Now, you might have heard that you can die from insomnia. And technically, that's true. If you don't sleep, for days and days, weeks and weeks at a time, your stress level is going to get so high that it might affect your heart, things like that. But those micro sleeps are going to protect you. And so it's going to be very hard for you to, die from insomnia, because your body is going to, at some point, force you to fall asleep so that you don't die. Um, Now, most types of insomnia can be fixed with simple behavioral changes. So, for example, you go get into bed at, let's say, 9 o'clock, and just stay there the whole night until your body starts getting used to the fact that you're going to go to bed at that time. And that's going to take a while, but eventually your body will get used to that. And then it'll start getting ready for you to fall asleep at that same exact time. That is, your hormones, your norepinephrine is going to start going down, and your melatonin levels are going to start going up because of your behavioral changes. Uh, Another thing is to only use your bed for sleeping. Sometimes you go to bed and you use your bed to do your homework, or to play video games, or to talk on the phone with your boyfriend or girlfriend. And what starts to happen is that your brain starts to be classically conditioned to be excited when you're on the bed, or to be, excuse me, stressed out when you are on the bed. And so when you're trying to go to bed, your body, your brain has been classically conditioned to be active, to turn on. And so now you can't fall asleep. So instead, we switch you to a desk. You only do your homework at the desk. You only talk to your boyfriend or girlfriend in the kitchen. And we reserve the bed specifically for sleeping. That's definitely going to help out. Diet and exercise are also going to be important. You don't want to be eating chocolate or drinking coffee before you go to bed at night, having a Red Bull, or a sports drink before you go to bed at night, because that is going, the caffeine in that is going to turn on your sympathetic nervous system. You also want to work out during the day. During the day, you want to work out, go for a jog, go for a walk, do some push ups, things like that. But you don't want to do that just before you go to bed. You want to do that 2, 3 hours before you get to bed, so that your body is tired, but it's not active. You want to give your body enough time to get rid of all of that norepinephrine so that your body can relax and get into bed. Now, there are some people who are called non-somniacs. And people who are non-somniacs might sleep 4 hours, 6 hours, but they're fine. They don't want any more sleep. In my experience, a lot of people who I've met that are non-somniacs tend to either have been in the military for a long time, and so their body just got used to having short uh, sleep patterns, and so they sleep 6 hours, and then they're fine the rest of the day. They're not tired, they're not groggy. All their body needs is those 6 hours. And usually older people, people who are in their 70s and older, sometimes need a lot less sleep as well. So these people might be called non-somniacs because they don't want any more sleep. All they need is those 4 to 6 hours. Now, sleepwalking is a sleeping disorder that occurs in stage 4. When you're in stage 4 in your delta sleep, not only should your brain be almost inactive in your delta waves, so very slow activation, but your body should also be immobilized. Your brain secretes hormones that prevents your body from moving. And so during your delta sleep, there isn't a lot of movement. But if one of those things goes wrong, then all of a sudden you're going to start getting movement. So if your brain doesn't secrete the right hormones, you're sleeping, but you start moving around. Your body is active. And so you might be walking around, things like that. This usually happens to children. Uh, the child's brain and body are not sort of they haven't mastered their sleeping patterns, and so you often get 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds get up and walk around, and then you realize that they're just sleepwalking. Some people deal with sleepwalking their whole lives, and then some people have sleepwalking issues due to the drugs they're taking. So certain psychoactive drugs will affect your sleeping patterns, and you will sleepwalk more often. And people who sleepwalk because of the drugs they're on usually have other types of symptoms, like they might be sleep eating or sleep driving. um, what's happening is that the uh, the front of your brain, right? Your frontal lobe is essentially non-active. It's still sleeping in delta sleep, but the rest of your brain might get activated. And if you've ever been driving, let's say you're driving to the mall, but you kind of zone out, and then all of a sudden you realize that you've been going towards Valencia, you've been driving towards your school because your body is used to driving to school. And so when you zoned out, your body, the back of your brain, right, started to uh, go into that automatic process, and you began driving to school instead of to the mall where you wanted to go. Well, that same dynamic happens when someone is sleepwalking. A part of their brain is asleep, but some other part has activated, and the part that's activated is just doing automatic processes controlled probably by the basal ganglia or something like that, where they're just sort of automatic behaviors that you've already mastered. And so you're open uh, the refrigerator door and grab something and eat it, etc. Or you might go for a drive. People have been known to sleep murder, to kill someone while they are sleepwalking. You're probably not going to get off. Not very many juries will let you off if you've been sleep murdering. There have been some, but it very rarely happens. Um, Now, nightmares are just dreams. And so your nightmares are going to occur during your REM cycle. Uh, Again, nightmares mostly occur in children. So children who are 5 or 6 are going to have a lot of nightmares, quite possibly because they're dealing with brand new things. And so as they internalize those things and they are sort of internalizing those memories, fortifying those memories, they create these nightmares. Uh, Obviously, we all have nightmares, even adults, usually during stressful times in our lives. The second sort of highest wave of nightmares occurs during college age, right? So in your, 18 to like 22, 23 age range. Why? Well, the same reason, because all of a sudden you're out on your own, you're doing brand new things, you're starting a new part of life. And so you're likely to try to internalize those things, and a lot of those things are stressful. So some nightmares come around. Now, people often confuse nightmares and night terrors. Night terrors are not nightmares. So where nightmares occur during your REM cycle, your night terrors occur during your stage 4. And if you want to watch the video, I'm going to post it on Canvas, and you can see Alfie in his night terror. Night terror are a lot more like sleepwalking. In fact, during night terrors, kids often walk around, but they are super aggravated. They're crying, they might be yelling, they might be saying that they're seeing scary stuff. Um, you can try to wake up a kid in a night terror, but that is not going to help you out at all. That uh, that kid is still a kid, so you're not going to be able to tell this kid, "Hey, you were just having a night terror, and now you're not. So try to relax and go back to sleep." That kid is not going to be able to do that. Their body is going to be tense. They're going to feel aggravated. They're going to feel scared because those things were happening into their body. And so when they wake up, they're still going to feel that way. And kids will make up all types of things as to why they feel so aggravated. And you're just going to have a hard time getting them back to sleep anyway. So the best thing to do with a night terror is to just try to soothe the child until the child relaxes and gets back to bed on their own. That doesn't happen quickly. Um, if you're trying to get back to bed, it's very difficult, especially for newer parents that are dealing with this, because first of all, it's a little scary when your kid is yelling, and then you're trying to get them back to sleep, and they're sleeping. They're not responding to anything you're saying or doing because they're still asleep. So it takes a while and it's difficult. You'll notice there that the age ranges are 4 to 12. It's probably not the case that a kid is going to have night terrors from age 4 to 12. That would be a red flag that something is happening. Uh, but it's quite normal for kids in that age range to have night terrors randomly, maybe for a few months, maybe a year, but usually that they grow out of that. Now, enuresis, you see that it says night terrors and enuresis. Um, Enuresis is bedwetting. Um, and this also tends to occur during stage 4. Now, if your child is wetting the bed, it is good to wake them up. Um, Usually, what you want to sort of train them to do is to start waking up on their own. So now you can do this by your waking up a little bit earlier. Then they start wetting the bed, and wake them up in the middle of the night on a regular basis until their body starts to do it on their own. Um, there are a lot of different sort of techniques. There are sheets that will sort of ring an alarm if they start to feel wet. And so the body, the child starts to associate the uh, the ringing bell with their bladder being full, and eventually they start waking up on their own. But for the most part, what you're trying to do is just get them up before they uh, wet the bed. A lot of times, people assume that bedwetting is related to abuse, and especially early on, uh, that's probably not the case. Now, If the child has been potty trained for a long time, they haven't wet the bed for a long time, and then randomly out of nowhere they start wetting the bed, or maybe even uh, pooping the bed, then that might be a red flag. But if it's just normal bed wetting because the child hasn't gotten used to waking themselves up at night, that's not necessarily something bad. That's not necessarily a red flag, except that you want to train them to wake up. Now, narcolepsy is also a sleeping disorder, but in narcolepsy, the problem is that people fall asleep in the middle of their waking day. I'm also going to put a video for this one on Canvas. Some animals are narcoleptic. Goats famously are narcoleptic, some are. And the video you're going to watch is about a narcoleptic dog. And what you'll notice is that whenever the dog gets agitated, whenever the dog is excited, good or bad, he sees the cameraman coming at him, and a normal dog gets aggravated and they start barking, but the dog with the narcolepsy starts to fall asleep. I believe his name is Skeeter. Um, the boy is petting him and wants to play, and Skeeter gets so excited to play that he falls asleep. They take him for a walk. Skeeter's excited to be out on a walk, and so he falls asleep. And that tends to be the case with narcolepsy. You tell someone who is has narcolepsy a joke, or you stress them out with work or something like that, and they fall asleep. Now, different people have different versions of this. So, some people will just start to get sleepy and they'll sit themselves down and they won't get hurt. But some people do just fall asleep standing up, and then sometimes they fall down. And so it can be quite dangerous, especially if you're driving or doing something else that might be dangerous, holding something that's dangerous, a knife or scissors or something like that. Um, so now, one thing I would like to point out is that people who don't have narcolepsy find this very interesting. But if your friend tells you that they have narcolepsy, don't tell them that you find it incredibly exciting and that you wish you could see them do it, because it is a real problem in their life that is serious to them. And they're going to get a little aggravated with you. Now, you might notice that I have a picture of Harriet Tubman there. Famously, Harriet Tubman um, had narcolepsy. Back then, they called them sleeping spells, where she would just fall asleep, which of course makes what she did even more harrowing. Harriet Tubman, of course, was famously one of the leaders of the Underground Railroads that took slaves from the South and brought them to freedom in the North. And so imagine what cost it was to her that anytime she was scared or excited, she might have one of these sleeping spells. Um, Now, the gentleman that you see there at the top has sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is often confused with snoring, because people who have sleep apnea often snore. But not everybody that snores has sleep apnea, and not necessarily everybody that has sleep apnea snores, although there is a relationship. What sleep apnea is that the back flap of your palate in your mouth um, sort of covers your airway. And so in the middle of the night, as you're sleeping, you stop being able to breathe, because now you can't get air in there. As you suck in, the uh, that back flap in your palate has prevented you from getting air into your lungs. And so you're not going to suffocate. What's going to happen is that your brain is going to wake you up just a little bit, just enough for you to adjust yourself and start breathing normally again. The problem with that is that if you are in the middle of your theta sleep when this happens, well, you have to wake yourself up again. And now we have to start going back down stage 2, stage 3, and then if you stop breathing again there in stage 3, you have to wake yourself up. And so sleep apnea prevents you from going through the normal cycle of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then back up to stage 3, stage 2 REM, and then back down to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then back up. That pattern of up and down, the levels, doesn't happen because you're consistently waking up to breathe. And so you always basically have to start over. And so that means that when you wake up, you're going to be restless. You're going to feel tired and groggy. Your body's going to feel achy because you didn't get enough sleep. Now, the high level of stress um, is going to increase your appetite, and so you're going to start eating more, and the stress is just by itself is also going to start making you gain weight. You're going to start storing a lot more fat. And so you're going to gain weight. And what happens, being heavier increases your problem with sleep apnea. And so your sleep apnea gets worse. And so you feel groggier and more tired and more stressed out. And so you gain more weight. Um, Now, the mask that the gentleman is wearing there is a mask that allows him to keep on breathing throughout the night. The problem with this mask is that it's quite uncomfortable at first. People who are given this mask a lot of times refuse to wear it because it's uncomfortable. But when they give it a shot and they start wearing it consistently, then they never want to take it off because they sleep so well and so soundly because they're actually breathing normally and they're going through their normal sleep cycles that they don't want to take it off or they can't sleep without it. So it's quite useful. Now, I have SIDS there as well, and SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. Unfortunately, sometimes mom and dad put a baby down to sleep, and when mom and dad wake up, they realize that the baby has died in the middle of the night. This is also related to breathing issues. There are a lot of reasons why kids might have SIDS, including being around smokers for too much or overheating because you put too many blankets on them or something like that. But another reason children have SIDS, and is probably the main reason, is sleep breathing issues. When you put a baby down to sleep, especially if that baby is an infant or they're sort of younger than 1 or 2, um, their chest muscles are not strong enough for them to continue to breathe if you put them down on their belly to sleep. A lot of parents will say, I put my baby down to sleep on their belly because they just fall asleep faster. Well, one of the reasons they fall asleep faster is because they're not breathing well. The strength they need to push their bodies off off of the ground so that their lungs push the body off of the ground so that they can fill up their lungs is just too much for their lungs and their chest muscles to do that. And so their breath gets more and more and more shallow. And yeah, of course they fall asleep faster because their breath is way too shallow. And if you leave them like that for too long, or if they're too young, then their breathing might get more and more and more shallow until eventually they stop breathing altogether. And so a lot of times that is related to the sudden infant death syndrome. It's always better to put the baby to sleep on their back. Some parents have issue with that because they're scared their baby might throw up and choke on the vomit. That also will not happen. Babies have a natural reaction so that if they throw up, they will naturally turn their head and let the spit up sort of come out of their mouth. But some parents still get scared, and so they would rather put their baby to sleep on their side, which is also fine as far as breathing is concerned. But you do have to watch the baby because sometimes then the baby falls on their chest, on their belly. And so don't put your babies to sleep on their belly. It's You think they're falling asleep faster because they're more comfortable, but in fact, they're falling asleep faster because they're not breathing as well. And of course, that can lead to SID.